Upshot, multi-world disc golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield on this Thursday, December 12th. We have a very special guest today. Returning to the program is Daniel Prentice. Daniel, what's going on? Welcome back.
Thanks, Charlie, for having me. Great to be back. I know some people, I'm still at Yeat Street here in North Carolina, Yeat Street Discs, and people have been asking me when you get back on the show. So there are going to be some people, happy listeners there in North Carolina.
Well, I think we're planning to have you on for a couple of shows here.
Oh, great.
Over the off season. But today we have our storylines bracket, and you gave me the feedback, as did a number of listeners, as did me and Josh to ourselves, that we needed to have a third voice on our storylines and our bracket shows, because Josh and I are forced to agree with each other when maybe we don't.
We got to do some horse trading and I'll give you this one, but I get the next one kind of thing.
It was not well thought out by us. Daniel is also the host of the Drafted podcast, where he does a similar thing, except it's drafts, not brackets, typically.
We do brackets for March every year. So
that makes sense.
We do get the bracket format as well, yeah.
Yeah, so check out the Drafted podcast with Daniel and Preston Thompson. I've been a guest on that show a couple of times.
Yeah,
I don't get the invite back to that either, so I don't know. Maybe that's what's going on here.
No, we'll get you back on. You're a busy man, Charlie. You're a hard one to pin down, you know?
Yeah, I suppose. I'm trying to be less busy. I'm trying to not fly all over the world as much next year. All right. So here's what we got today. 16 top storylines from the season. And we put them in a bracket. We haven't really thought about it too much yet. We just kind of did quick seeding. And we're going to just together dive in and make our votes on each round. And we're going to decide what was the biggest storyline of 2024. Josh, what was our winner last year?
Well, Charlie, last year our finalists, we had Simon to MVP and Kristen with the Grand Slam win. Kristen was the one who won it out with her Grand Slam of the majors in the season. So that was our winner last year.
Kristen will be back in the bracket this year as the first female player to reach 1,000 rated, but not 1,001. They blew that.
She also will make the gaffs bracket.
All right, let's begin. Do we want to start at the top with the typical blowout 116 matchup?
Yeah.
All right.
We have no Cinderella upsets here, everybody. That doesn't happen on the first round.
Well, have we had 16 wins over one seeds now in March Madness? It's definitely happened at least once in the last couple of years.
I think so, yeah, because Virginia losing to UMBC was the first, and then it happened was it Kansas who did it a couple years later?
I thought it was Purdue.
Purdue,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
That was wild.
Yeah.
154-2 all-time record. I'm pretty sure that 16 seeds are 0-2 in storylines brackets in the Upshot. So here we go. We kick it off. Number one storyline in the seeding is Gannon Burr having a dominant year, earning more than $200,000 in prize money. Absolutely putting together one of the great seasons we've ever seen. It's getting compared to the finest seasons of McBeth, and didn't quite reach the point of being the greatest season of all time. He did not win the world championships and wasn't really in the conversation, but a tremendous year from Gannon Burr. It's going up against the 16 seed, which is KJ USA and Vino Makla. Of course, KJ USA, Kevin Jones, leaving Prodigy mid-season, leaving their contracts and signing with Innova, both of them. A little, still don't really have the full details on that one, but, Prodigy is not a company that's happy to let you leave your contract mid-season unless they want you to. Am I right?
Evidence would suggest.
Perhaps trying to shed some salary on their part, coming up to an agreement with the players and with Innova to kind of take over the deal. So that's your 116 matchup. Josh, your thoughts?
No Cinderella story here. Gannon's dominance defined the MPO season. And while I think that the KJ USA and Vino leaving Prodigy may be a story of what's to come this offseason and could be a dominant storyline in our next season, I expect it to probably be ranked a lot higher. Gannon's dominance is clearly the 1 seed for a reason, and no 1 seed upset this year on the Upshot storyline bracket.
Dan, what say you?
Yeah, I mean the Prodigy guys leaving feels more just like kind of a blip to me, like a news ticker kind of thing, more than even a fully developed storyline. So easily Gannon for sure.
Yeah, to be honest, I think in some ways that fits into a larger picture of something we're going to talk about later in the bracket, with the way that things have gone in 2024 from a business perspective. So yeah, I'm also taking Gannon's dominance, easy call. 8-9 matchup. The ascendancy of MVP, going from being a, one of the pack of companies behind your Innovas and your Discrafts, to now perhaps being on level, or maybe are we starting to see them even go past in terms of popularity, some of these legacy brands. That's the 8 seed. The 9 seed is the shifting tides of the parity era. Last year we talked about how in MPO, it was anybody's game, any given week, any given Sunday. And then we had Kristen just destroying everybody in FPO. And then that kind of flipped this year, where we had a really, really obvious dominant season from Gannon and a couple of other players who really defined the year, like Ricky, Isaac winning Worlds, and not as many of those surprise wins. And then meanwhile in FPO, it was much more wide open, and we saw multiple win seasons from a lot of players, and some surprise winners as well. So that's the matchup. Dan, I'll let you talk first.
This is tough. I don't know. I feel as an outsider that the parody angle has been a little forced, and that's maybe why it feels like this weird flip is kind of a story. It feels like a projection story that just people got kind of wrong, if that makes sense. Whereas the MVP ascendancy, at least, from my perspective as working in a disc golf retail shop, very much a real thing. They kind of went from being a little cult following, I would say, to just, off the top of my head, don't have pure numbers, but probably being the second best selling manufacturer in our shop.
Who's number one?
Innova, I think, still, just because, mostly because I have so many discs, and there's still people who've been playing for 30, 40 years who have only ever thrown Innova that come in. But yeah, and then them continuing to gobble up superstars as the face of their brand, getting the YouTube video as well, the Smarter Everyday video, which I think went pretty viral. So MVP gets my vote here.
Josh?
I think I agree. It's easy to kind of forget how important the storyline was at the beginning of the season, because Eagle and Simon underperformed. And I don't know if it's, especially in Simon's case, he had another kid. It's not his fault. But it still is.
And he still won a tournament.
And he still won it, right? He still won a tournament. Again, I think we have a little bit here. It would be easy to want to favor the parity era because it is a storyline that is kind of defined, and our perception of both the consolidation and the story and the parity of the talent at the top of both divisions was something that was is a pass through the entire season. So it's easy to give the recency a little bit more weight, but MVP's ascendance is one that has been a staple feature of this bracket for 3 years now, from James Conrad to Simon to now Eagle. It continues to be a dominant storyline in the sport. And just because the tail end of the season was somewhat quiet for MVP's star-studded roster, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is not still a critical storyline that is defining our industry and manufacturers. I'm with Dan here. I think MVP wins it.
You haven't said the Silva Saarinen's name.
Which Silva, you're right. You're right.
She was very relevant this year.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Got some wins in Europe. Was
playoff GMC,
a top 10 FPO player without a doubt, maybe top 5.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what a great signing from MVP. Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm almost like, how did that happen? How did they spot this, and did they get lucky, or did they see something? They got the scouts on the ground. Yeah, I think it's the parody story and how things have kind of changed one season to the next feels more like an interesting note and not like a storyline that really like was clearly the thing. So I'm going to take MVP as well. I think what's interesting to me is that like MVP still feels like they have room to run. But I will also say we've seen this over the course of disc golf history where like a brand is like popping off and then kind of recedes for one reason or another. And like there is value in these big old brands that make a lot of discs and have a credible distribution. I mean, MVP, all I ever hear is, especially from the bigger retailers, is we can't get their discs. Like, it's like a sign that they're popular, but it's also a sign that MVP maybe is struggling to like produce at the levels necessary to get everybody what they want. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's a balance there, of course, right? If you have too much stuff and you flood the zone, then maybe there's like a little bit less of a sense of like, this feels like an important product to get. But, you know, when, you know, sales are being basically left on the table, what does that mean? Maybe it means MVP is the smart one in the room and they haven't overexpanded and over inventoried going into a downturn. So anyway,
exclusivity sells.
Yeah, more on that in the next round. The 5-12 matchup, the number 5 seed is the European swing and everything that went into that. I mean, we had the biggest DGPT swing over there that we've seen. It felt like a meaningful part of the tour, more American players going over, a tremendously entertaining European Open, and a less entertaining but very interesting Estonian Disc Golf Festival where hundreds of thousands of dollars are being poured into the tournament by the government to create a spectacle and a sort of like spectator experience that we really haven't seen any disc golf tournaments match. I mean, they got like the fog machine and the walkout music like we're at a WWE match. That's going up against the 12 seed, which is Isaac Robinson, going two-time world champion, winning again and kind of, you know, stunning everybody in the process. I mean, he hadn't necessarily played all that well to that point in the season, and then he comes out and kind of wins comfortably. Like he was up midway through that tournament and never yielded. You know, didn't get brutally crushed by the slope green hole, and just really managed the weekend extremely effectively. So becomes a two-time world champion. Not so many of those in the sport's not too long history. I will say Isaac winning it's a great story. I think it makes this offseason a little more interesting. I think it ignites him as a top player, and I think the sort of slow start to the year was an aberration. Does that outcompete like the entire continent of Europe getting so huge into disc golf? Probably not for me. I think, you know, you've got Worlds headed to Europe next year. It feels like the time where Europe might even overtake the United States in terms of like at least per capita interest in the sport.
I think that Isaac is a big story, but feels like one of those stories where in order to be an individual who defines a season, you really have it takes more than even just a Worlds win, unfortunately for Isaac. He has definitely taken the mantle of Worlds Whisperer from Emerson Keith, and that firmly belongs to Isaac now, but European swing wins for me too.
I know there's been a lot of debate on this show this year about how many wins a Worlds win is, but now we know definitively that a Worlds win is not worth a continent in terms of storyline. So that is good to know.
Isaac came on here and said it was worth 10 Pro Tour wins.
Which, that's easy for him to say, right?
So we all a sweep once again for the Euro swing. No upsets yet in the bracket. On to the 4-13 matchup. Number 4, Paul McBeth doesn't get a win during the season for the first time in 13 years. Is this the end of McBeth's time as a winner on tour? or will this be a, hey, I had a baby, cut me some effing slack season? That goes up against the number 13 seed, which is Ken Climo, leaving Innova in a like, how in the world does this happening story that just broke a couple weeks ago. So that's the matchup. Dan, what do you think about this one? The goat matchup.
The goats. Yeah. What a matchup. The Climo one feels to me like that story has just kind of started. Like we don't even know the whole story yet. So it's hard for me to vote for it here. McBeth, I think, like if we were to do a stories of the last 10 years, McBeth is probably number one, right? Like he has been the defining figure of the sport for such a long time. And I'm not going to sit here and say that he can't win again, but I think it is clear that him being the story of the sport is over. And I think this was kind of the punctuation of that being the case. So for me, that is definitely the bigger story of the season.
I'm going to make this one our first non-unanimous one. The more I think about it, the more I think that McBeth's storyline is also not fully written. In the sense that if McBeth comes back and wins next year, we're not going to care anymore about the streak. If he comes back and wins another USDGC, like that still puts McBeth as just the longevity, the GOAT, and he still finished 6th in Pro Tour points. I think Climo's is hard to give weight to because, like you said, Dan, we're still missing the ending of that story, and we may not get it till next season. But having what was the first major sponsor that really was, had his name on all sorts of discs and kind of set the pace for Innova in terms of, as the dominant brand, that to me feels like by the end, I think we're going to see it as a lot bigger story than maybe even we do now. I'm voting Climo on this one, giving it the first upset. Charlie, your tiebreaker.
This is a hard one.
Dan's right, though. If McBeth doesn't win again next year or doesn't and continues to regress, this is the beginning of the end, and it's a significant storyline.
I'm going to vote for Climo, and I'll tell you why. McBeth's decline has been clear for multiple seasons. It hasn't been steep.
Mm-hmm.
It's been gradual. I mean, even this year, he finished comfortably inside the top 10, and he was coming off of an injury at the end of last season. He really played well through the middle part of this year and just didn't, quite put it all together at any point. And, maybe didn't have as much time to practice, was home more, of course. But let me see what McBeth with a chip on his shoulder and a full offseason to practice and full health looks like with a child that's becoming a toddler and not a little baby that you have to take care of all the time. I think it's clearly a story, but it feels more like some of the recent wins from McBeth have been like the surprise more than like him continuing to be a dominant figure.
Mm-hmm.
Last year he hadn't won at all, right? Until he won in Europe, and then he got hurt and had to drop out of the European Open, and then he didn't play, basically. So, I think it's a story. But the thing about the Climo thing, it's not just it's easy to say, well, why does this matter? Like, the guy hasn't played competitive disc golf in 15 years, and he's an incredible legacy figure in the sport. But is this really going to move the needle? Well, we don't know that part of the story yet for sure. But to me, the symbolism, the what it means that Discraft has gone in and sniped Ken Climo from Innova. We could look back on this and be like, we watched as Innova's market share declined, and then started to get overtaken by a younger, more forward-thinking brands like Discraft and MVP. Discraft has completely changed their approach. I mean, they were the ones who were the stodgy old marketing, 15 years in the past, just a few years ago. And then they signed McBeth, and look at what they are now. I mean, they have probably the best, sort of global marketing of their players of any sponsored team. They have whole website where you can see all the logos and you can shop the different stores and they have all this McBeth gear, and they do these cool, like, it's like so much more hip now than it was 10 years ago. Isn't it cool how I use the word hip? I'm a hip guy myself.
Charlie, are you telling me that Dave coming on and talking about an end of a sidewinder just doesn't do it for you anymore?
But I'm saying, like, look at they have put the people in positions to do the marketing who are thinking about like the modern game a lot more. And in a way, this is like going the other direction, right? To take a chance. I do think it's a chance on marketing an older player from a previous legacy who doesn't have a great connection to the modern player who started playing in the last 5 years, which is probably half the sport. So how is that going to work out? I don't know. But I'm very interested to see how they approach this, because it's probably not going to be Ken Climo on the big Tour Series list and like he has Tour Series discs. There's probably going to be more to it than that. You know, I think the fact that ClimoDiscs.com has been registered tells you a little bit more about how they might approach this. And what does this symbolically mean for the kind of like balance of power between these major manufacturers? Is this Discraft making a move that could, with Page and Paul and AB and Climo, like, is this where they take over as the number one brand? It could happen.
A lot of speculation required for these two.
Number 3 seed, Kristen, the first female player to get to 1,000 rated. What a moment that was. Definitely recommend, if you missed the show, go back and check out our interview with Kristen, which we got to do on the day she got to 1,000 rated. That was awesome. It goes up against the Worlds Heading to Europe announcement from this year. And of course, we will be watching the World Championships and the European Disc Golf Festival as back-to-back majors over in Europe next summer. Dan, what do you think?
This is a tough one. Again, this kind of, you mentioned, I think it was you, Charlie, who mentioned it, like Europe kind of feels like it's making a move to like be the spot for disc golf, maybe even usurping the United States. And this feels like a very big part of it. We waited for this for such a long time. You know, the anticipation of when Europe would get Worlds has been bubbling for a few years now. But so has an FPO player getting to 1,000 rated. To me, I think Kristen's 1,000 rated didn't feel as grand as I wanted it to. I think maybe because it didn't hit during her super dominant season, if that makes sense. Like, I think if you'd been able to tie it in with that, it would have felt like a bigger, more grandiose thing. So I'm kind of inclined to lean towards Worlds to Europe, even though I mean, I think maybe both felt a little bit inevitable. Maybe Worlds to Europe felt a little bit more inevitable, but I think in terms of pomp and circumstance, it feels like the bigger story to me.
Having a third person on was a great idea, because I'm going to split with Dan here again, and I'll tell you why. The issue, it's not even an issue. Worlds in Europe next year is probably going to be a top 5 storyline, and it may go all the way. And I know that I'm going to give it a lot of favor then. And so this year, it's like the announcement is exciting, but next year's what I'm waiting for. And I still have Euro representation earlier in the bracket. So out of pure like logical decision making here, I think like we're not going to be talking about Kristen as 1,000. And even if she gets 1,001 next year, that's still like not the same milestone as being the first FPO player ever to hit 1,000 rated. So out of pure just like logical, I will get to vote for Europe Worlds in Europe next year. I'm giving Kristen first to 1,000 rated the win.
You're deferring basically to the second half.
I'm basically deferring. Exactly.
Yeah, I think the problem is like the storyline is that it's been announced.
Yeah.
Not that it's actually happened. So I'm going Kristen. Because
it's a fair...
I think we will forever, like, I get what you're saying, Dan, about it feeling like a little, like it kind of popped up in the middle of like kind of a more marginal season. Yeah. But when you think about the history books,
sure,
this will be something we look back at. It's like Kristen swept the majors and then reached 1,000 rated. And like, you're not going to be thinking about this like couple of months and like, oh, didn't play that good at a couple tournaments. No one will care about that in like 2
That's
years.
Fair.
So I think to me, it's like an iconic moment in all of disc golf history. And it, you can't say that it didn't happen to somebody who totally deserved it. Like after the season she had, you would have loved to have seen it hit earlier. If it like happened right at the end of 2023, it would have been like, wow, what an incredible achievement. But Kristen already won the bracket last year, so she gets to advance at least around here. We go to the 6 versus 9 matchup, and that is Ricky. Wait, 6. I'm sorry. I said 6 versus 9, but that's not correct. 6 versus 11. Got to get this right. 6 versus 11. Ricky is the number 6 seed, playing second fiddle, but having a tremendous season, a lot of wins, and some of the best disc golf that we saw all year coming from Rick. His battle back and forth with Gannon this season, particularly at some select tournaments like European Open and the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, was electric. It goes up against the 11 seed, which is Anthony Barella, breaking through, getting a bunch of wins, having an amazing start to the year, looking like the player of the year through the first couple months of the tour, and still overall having an awesome season. Inconsistent, but still the highs were incredibly high. I'll take this one first.
You don't want to keep tie breaking?
I feel like I don't get to be the tiebreaker every time. I have to take that one. I think it's a tough one. I have to take AB because it's more of a new story in 2024. Like Ricky playing great and playing second fiddle. I mean, we've seen that for 10 years. Josh brutally laughed.
I knew the second you said AB's a new storyline, I'm like, man, Charlie, that's something I would say. Like,
I'm not being a hater. I really am not. I think my point is more that like we've been waiting for Barella, and it's not just that he like as a player he did well. Like he's become one of the most popular players in the sport.
Yeah.
You see more AB jerseys than any other sort of like piece of merch out at these Pro Tour events. I think to me that like just outshines the Ricky storyline a little bit. Ricky had an awesome year and he was going to have another awesome year. I think he's going to win a major in the next couple of years, get back into the major circle for the first time in like 8 years. Josh says no, but Josh is a hater. We know this.
Big hater.
Big hater. So I'm voting AB's breakthrough. Dan?
I feel like you maybe should have sent it to Josh in case he doesn't vote how I do. Yeah, send it to Josh.
You probably shouldn't have done that. I also give it to AB's breakthrough.
Okay.
The reason that Ricky, and this one actually feels a little bit to me like the MVP versus parity era, is that Ricky's second fiddle feels like such an important storyline because it was a consistent storyline. And I think it's easy to give an extra weight to the consistency and the permeance of a storyline from beginning to end of a season. AB's breakthrough, he won a bunch and then he kind of went cold and had some really bad finishes and won again. And so the little more swingy makes it easier to kind of forget about it in just our recency bias that happens. But for all the reasons that Charlie said, and the point that like AB got to walk out of the shed finally, right? He got to see sunlight. Now he's, if he doesn't win a major in the next couple of years, he's going to go upstairs to the shed with Calvin. But that is a momentous, that is a big moment. You only get to win your first tournament once, and he won 4 of them in his first season doing it. So I also give it to AB.
Yeah, I agree. These two feel like the 2A and 2B storylines of MPO this year. So fitting that they meet in the first round. But yeah, I do think AB. Again, I agree that Ricky is kind of like the continuation, that he's been really good, but not quite getting the wins that he wants to win to really fully make himself the bigger story. But yeah, AB. The fact that he can win, I think is going to be huge for him as just a player in future storylines as well. So kind of feels like the start of whatever his career will really be.
I mean, you could just imagine if he can find some more consistency throughout the year, he could be the one who's battling Gannon every week.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that would
question.
be really good for the sport if
Oh,
those two
agreed.
guys end up being the ones who are the kind of like, or if we get the trio at the top, right? If it's Rick and AB and Gannon battling all year, that'd be tremendous.
Important question. Does AB Hole 16 get to continue onto this year because of how many times? Like, does he get a place in the gaffs bracket for every time he missed the island?
Okay, here's a better question. How successful does AB have to be before we stop bringing that up every time we bring him up?
I didn't bring it up. Josh is a hater.
Really? He's got to get really, really successful.
Yeah, I think it's a fair. Like, does he win a major? If he wins a major, does he get a pass?
He needs 2 majors or
Two
European
majors.
Open.
What?
Okay.
Josh, what are these standards? Now is not even enough to win a major to get out of the shed. You got to win.
No, that's not a shed.
majors.
He can leave the shed. It's
the shadow of the shed.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. The 7 seed. That's our second upset, by the way. The 11 seed AB breakthrough. Seeding too low. Number
in
7
fairness,
seed.
we made a mistake on the bracket. We thought that was seeded number 9.
Yeah, they just had a typo in there.
Yeah, we had typos.
Number 7, Evelina breakthrough year. Best season of hers ever on tour. World championship win. Multiple tour wins. Got the putting finally back to like a place of at least acceptability. And that goes up against Nicholas Antila, becoming the first Finnish player to win an MPO on tour. So it's a Finnish battle here in the 7-10 spot. I think there's a great case for both of these. So who's been starting? I think we'll go to Josh first here.
I think you guys have started quite a bit, so I'm happy to take this one. This is so tough because, like, they both signal very important things. In both important things for like Finland, right? And it's funny because that there's individual significance, there's divisional significance, there's nationality significance here. Nicholas winning an MPO is one that we've kind of been waiting for in that moment, because we've talked about how dominant Finland is and the players that come out of Finland, and obviously plays a huge role in that. But man, Evelina winning Worlds is again a huge moment for Finland. But to me, one felt, and this kind of goes back a little bit to Dan's comments about Europe. One felt somewhat inevitable, and the other didn't. It was inevitable to me that an MPO Finnish player, when one of the young, super talented, probably Nicholas, was going to win MPO eventually. Evelina, like, we rode off at the beginning of the season. Charlie jumped off the horse. He thought it was done, and that's what it took. And now Evelina wins a world championship. Incredible deal for both players and for the country. On both cases, Finland's got to be very proud. But the world's win got to be the tiebreaker. It goes to Evelina. Dan,
I'm a little surprised that this one is even being postured as close. Niklas's win, again, I think it's like a cool little kind of moment for the history books. But for me, it's more like, what can he do more going forward? Like, is this just a one-off? Is it a taste of the future of him being a significant player that we, I think have seen as his potential for a little while now? But Evelina's turnaround was stunning. It was like such a good feel-good story as well. Seeing her finally get over the hump and then do it multiple times was really, really cool. I think one of like the best storylines in recent disc golf memory for me, seeing Evelina be able to get over her struggles and have so much success this year. So easily Evelina for me.
Yeah, I got to go Evelina. I think I like barely remember that Nicholas won a tournament this year. Sorry, it was a long time ago. Yeah. And then he didn't really like match it with great play the rest of the year. He played good. Don't get me wrong. I just like
third in Pro Tour standings.
Yeah. No, I understand. But like so much of it has to do with like, are you in the conversation down the stretch? And I know he was right there at Worlds, and he kind of got, I don't think he was going to win anyway, but he kind of got wrecked by the slow pull.
That was tough.
I just think like Evelina is like one of the main stories that you're going to remember from this year on the course. Like if someone asks you, what are the most interesting things that happened on the disc golf course this year? You'd be like, Gannon was awesome. AB finally won. Evelina got over the putting yips and won Worlds. Right? So like to me, easy call. Right? And Evelina is not the player of the year. She wasn't the best player, but that was the biggest FPO storyline. And what's crazy is that, to be fair, I've been talking about the putting improving. She putted terribly at Worlds. Awful. But didn't 3-putt that much and threw the disc so effing pure the whole week that it didn't matter. Wild stuff. So Evelina moves on. Last matchup here in the first round is the number 2 seed Industry Slowdown. I'm not going to elaborate. We've talked about it a lot on the show the last couple of weeks. And going up against the number 15 seed, which is Missy Gannon, winning the Disc Golf Pro Tour Player of the Year award. And Josh and I thinking that is not quite right, and it should have been Kristen. But Missy wins MVP. The big putt on 17, the upshot on 18, and that wins her the tournament Player of the Year, the number 1 seed in the Pro Tour Championship, everything. It was crazy. So that's the matchup, and I will go first this time. Look, the Industry Slowdown is like we've had multiple episodes talking about it. Missy Pody, it's cool. I think it shows a little bit more about the parity that we've had this season in FPO, but it's just not gonna beat a story that's gonna define a lot of this year on the business side and maybe much of next year as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not close here.
Missy has to be included as well because she does win her first major this season when she wins U.S. Women's, which is something that's easy to overlook because she's won Throw Pink, but it is her first official major. The other thing, though, that I think isn't Charlie, you hint that we need it shows a lot about the parity era. I completely agree. I think it's why it has to be in the bracket. If we're gonna have Evelina's breakthrough and Kristen being first to 1,000 rated, you've got to have Missy, who is the Player of the Year, in this discussion as well. But I think this also, Missy is going to get a little bit dinged by she is an incredible player, and she's won now multiple Player of the Years. She is always there because she wins when it matters and is always in the mix, but she has not had a season like Kristen's, and she oftentimes is, much like Ricky, second fiddle to a player. And it's changed who that player is, eventually. And maybe if we did a, decade in review at some point, Missy is probably going to be a staple feature of that decade. But unfortunately, none of her seasons or individual awards or accomplishments have been the kind of momentous ones that even Evelina or Kristen's are. And so, Missy suffers from that, has to be an inclusion on this bracket, though. And so Industry Slowdown is definitely the clear winner here. Just wanted to give Missy her moment, though.
It's deserved, yeah, for sure. I'm glad you did that, Josh.
All right, back to the top. We're in the quarterfinals. We've got Gannon's Dominance, the number 1 seed, taking on the number 8 seed, MVP's Ascendancy. I'll throw it over to Josh first.
If Eagle had won a major or multiple events this season, I think we have a real case where MVP just wins this entire bracket. Much like Simon did last year, he made the move and won four tournaments. If MVP had managed to do it again, I think this could have been the storyline to rival Gannon. Eagle didn't. It's been outside of Silva, relatively quiet for MVP. And again, Gannon's dominance is the defining story to me of the MPO season. Gannon takes the win.
Dan?
Same. I think the MVP bit kind of feels like almost an addendum to another off-course story that is currently our 2 seed. And yeah, Gannon crushed the whole parody era build up coming into the end of the year, which again, we had it as its own storyline. And a lot of that is because of Gannon's play this year. His rapid ascendance to the very top, what has been really, really fun to watch. And yeah, I think in terms of on-course things, feels like at least right now, until we get dissect the minutia, maybe feels like the defining on-course story of the season.
Yeah, I got to go with you guys here. I'm taking Gannon's dominance as well. I mean, if there's one thing you're going to remember about 2024, it's probably this story. Maybe we will see it start to get pushed in semis or finals, this storyline, but not yet. MVP is a very interesting overall story for like the last couple years, and I'll be curious to see where it goes, but it runs out of steam here in the storylines bracket. Next matchup is the 5 seed European Swing taking on Climo leaving Innova. We'll go Dan here first.
Gosh, you guys, I mean, I voted against Climo in the last round, so I'm curious to see where you guys fall on this one, but it feels like an easy Euro Swing vote for me in that case. It just very much feels like the European Swing it solidified Europe as being a real part of the whole season. You know, like for so long, I just felt like this thing, well, a few players will go over there, but no, not anymore. And it feels very much like going forward, that will continue to be the case. So that feels like the actual sport changing thing that happened this year, much more so than Climo leaving Innova.
Josh?
This one is so hard because there's the one question that I have. Because here's the thing, Europe has had a major for a decade, right? Europe now has had in the past some Pro Tour events. And so it's true that it is bigger, it is more grandiose, it is a more central element of the tour. And I think that is critical. But this progression was one that, like, as long as Europe kept doing well with everything that had been given, like this was the next step. It definitely felt like a bigger step this year with the live broadcasting of all the events and you know everything that goes into it. But like this was the logical progression of disc golf in a continent where per capita it is more popular than it is in the United States. I don't think the more I think about the Climo leaving Innova, the more I'm not sure we are grasping, and I'm not 100% sure that it's going to make Discraft a whole bunch of money. Like they may not make up that contract in the long run. I don't know the details of it yet in terms of how long and what exactly is going to happen. And so that's a big question mark to me, but it also could be a move that we could look and pair right next to McBeth and say, look at the significance of what Discraft has done when we look back about what they've done. And this is a continuation of it. This one is really hard for me. I'm going to give my vote to Climo.
Wow. I'm out on that.
Do it.
I'm out on Climo.
Good. I was starting to feel a little crazy there for a bit.
Listen, I think Josh, you're really coming around on this Climo thing. Huh?
I really am. The more I talk about it, the more I'm like, man, this really is kind of a crazy deal.
It's interesting to consider like how they're going to approach it, and you got to give their marketing department credit because they've done a really good job over the last couple of years. For the fence. So if they do this right. And I do think it matters, right? The marketing piece of it matters.
It does.
Like Innova has just kind of like, okay, Ken Climo signature disc, but like does anybody care, right? Like KC Pro Plastic. I mean, people like care about that plastic, but is it because it's KC? Not anymore.
No,
they haven't done anything with. But this is the thing, right? I've said it so many times, and I'll say it again. Moving sponsors is the thing that generates electricity. In a player and excitement about their products and buying their discs and all that. And Discraft is taking advantage of that. It's got to be brutally painful for Innova to watch this happen. And like they could have probably tried to outbid, but it probably doesn't make sense for them to try to outbid when they don't have a mechanism or a plan in place to like do something with Climo besides what's already been happening.
Discraft might eat that contract. Innova definitely would have eaten that contract.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very interesting story. I think there's much left to tell about it, but the European Swing feels like it's defining the future of disc golf in a way that Climo is more like a throwback to the past. And so for me, the success of this year's European swing, so the brilliant courses that we get to watch, in many ways, besides the time zone problems, it was more fun to watch European events this year. Like some of those Midwest U.S. tournaments, just like, God, dude, it's just brutal. So luckily the schedule's a little better for 2025, but yeah, Euro swing for me. So it moves on. Next up, Kristen, first to 1,000 rated, up against the AB breakout season. Anthony Barella having a heck of a year. This is a very interesting one. Josh, you're up.
Oh man, this is the other one I think is really difficult. The deliberation I have here is that AB's breakthrough is one that may define the future of disc golf in terms of like, this is the start of, one of the next great rivalry of a next amazing player. And all of that is incredibly exciting. And man, I want to vote for it. Kristen has done something that no FPO player in history has ever done. Not even the GOAT, who we thought was going to be able to pull it off. And here's the thing. If Paige had won it, she would have done it thanks to obviously she would have had to play well, but she had a really beneficial scheduling with COVID where she got to drop a lot of events, and she was playing on less events than ever before in any of her ratings. Kristen did it by just beating the field mercilessly week after week after week after week. And even when she's bad, being still the player you had to beat and setting a standard so high that if you wanted to win an FPO tournament, you had to shoot over 1,000 rated for the first half of this season. That's a level of history that has not been done before. It may very well be Kristen's most significant accomplishment, and I have to give it to Kristen.
I still think the Grand Slam season is going to be the bigger achievement, but I think from a symbolism perspective, getting to 1,000 rated, and it's very possible she will be the only FPO player rated 1,000 for quite a few years. Like more players are going to get there. The standard of the division is clearly going up every single year. Eventually, it will become expected that top players will be 1,000 rated. But it may not be for a while. AB's breakthrough, it's a great story, but it's not going to have the same legs historically as Kristen, and that's why I'm going to go Kristen. Hopefully Dan agrees and I didn't spoil us by already picking the winner.
No, excuse me. After I voted first on the Kristen's first round matchup, and your opinions did kind of sway me honestly on that. So yeah, I agree, and I think if AB had maybe a more consistent breakthrough, it felt like he started real hot and was the story early on. But I completely agree. I like if the point of the bracket is to figure out like what we will look back on for this year, then yeah, it's definitely Kristen making history.
Yeah, and I think like even in the context of just straight 2024, like AB had a great year, and I think there's a lot of people who just kind of watch more MPO and probably feel like that's a bigger story. But I think like if you're thinking about it from a holistic, like you're keeping the divisions balanced in your mind, Kristen to 1,000 is, I mean, it's a tremendous part of the season. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. From that sense, it's kind of, you really could pick either one here, I think.
Especially AB wins a major Worlds.
Sure.
Very different.
Maybe a different story.
Yep.
All right, we go to the quarterfinal. Is the industry Slowdown, number 2 seed, taking on the 7 seed Evelina Breakthrough. I'll go first. I don't have much to say about this one. I think the industry Slowdown is still like it's like been the whole year. Evelina is a great encore story, but it just is not gonna have the same overall resonance. Like everything's being reshaped right now by the fact that the industry is slowing down. Contracts are being reshaped. Player allegiances are being reshaped. Businesses are trying to figure out how they're going to move forward. To me, it's just like too significant not to be moving on easily here. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe a little bit biased here because I feel it. Like every day I go into work, feel the industry slow down very much so. So yeah, this is Yeah, shout out to Evelina. I'm definitely glad she made it through the first round. Like I said, great feel-good story, but has to be industry slowdown here.
I'm going to get your thoughts in an upcoming round about industry slowdown from your perspective.
Sure.
Josh?
Industry slowdown. Not much to add for this round. I'll save some thoughts for next.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. Semifinals on the other side. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Dropping today, mystery bottle carriers. They're 50% off. You choose the size, and they will send a color at random to ship out to you. They make a great gift for yourself or a loved one this holiday season. They've got a handful of one-off colorways in each size, from the Nightcap, which is 2 bottles, the Share, which is 4 bottles, or the one that I have, the Entertainer, which is 6 bottles. I just took this on a trip upstate so I could carry a few bottles of wine, some Fernet, a couple other things. Just really, really nice way to be able to transport cans or bottles. So highly recommended. At 50% off, you're getting an awesome deal. They've also got some new small runs of the Super Deluxe Rufus available now. The 5 new colorways are the final batches of the style. They have an additional upper detail pocket, upgraded mesh and shoulder pads, 2-tone zippers. It's a really fun, unique product. A great way to transition to the double convertible Rufus, which is what will be made moving forward. Speaking of, Black and Cryptek Typhon are in stock, 2 brand new colorways of that double convertible Rufus. Go to pounddiscgolf.com to get yours today. Well, the aches and pains of age can creep up on you quickly. That doesn't mean you have to suffer in silence. Our sponsor, Sunset Lake CBD, has just what you need to soothe your aching joints and calm down those sore spots. From salves and rubs to gummies and tinctures, Sunset Lake CBD has everything you need to find relief at the end of your day. I definitely enjoy, if I've got some sore muscles, using one of their CBD salves, salves. I for my whole life I pronounce it salve, but it's salve. You put that on sore muscles, feel great. It smells nice. It's just a really nice product overall. Sunset Lake CBD is offering Upshot listeners 20% off all orders. Go to sunsetlakecbd.com and use code UPSHOT at checkout. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown. Welcome back to the Upshot. All right, it's time for the semifinals of our 2024 Storylines bracket. We've got Gannon's Dominance going up against the European Swing. It's the 1 seed versus the 5 seed in the semis. And we're going to throw it over to Dan first on this one.
All right. These are 2 great stories, both very deserving of being here. It basically comes down to on-course story versus kind of big picture for the future of the sport story. And I am going to choose to lean towards the on-course story in this case. I think I don't want everything from this point on to be all off the course stuff. You know, at the end of the day, we follow sports because of our investment in the outcomes of the competition, right? And there certainly are bigger, big things going on in the sport as well, big picture stuff, but I think I would be too sad, really, just to not put the defining on-course story into the final.
Josh?
Gannon Burr is a 19-year-old, just unanimously, I'm saying it because anyone who voted against him was obviously biased and wrong. Gannon Burr just won unanimously Player of the Year, putting together more wins than we've seen since any player post-COVID, and rivaling McBeth for one of and putting his name among one of the best seasons. It's funny. Dan's right about on course versus off course, but in terms of like impact on the future of the sport, it's not clear to me that Gannon is not a bigger impact on the future of the sport, because you may have a European swing, but if Gannon goes over and sweeps Europe next year and wins Worlds and the European European championship,
Disc Golf Festival.
What's it called next year?
It's still called that.
Oh, it is the European Disc Golf Festival,
yeah.
and hits both those majors. Then Gannon has finished a not quite a career Grand Slam, but he's one step closer and heralds in what is the next great player of disc golf. It's got to be Gannon. Like Gannon's story is remarkable and just does not come along that often. And I think it's easy to overlook because we transitioned from McBeth to Gannon in the way that we did. But we're watching something special.
When you have whispers of future GOAT swirling around, it's going to be one of it's an easy win here for me over European swing. I mean, the European swing is very interesting, and I think next year it has a chance to go further in the bracket because
I think it could go all the way next year. If
Worlds goes great, and I think that it could, and it maybe it will, but we could have 10,000 people at Worlds final round next year. That's not impossible. I mean, in fact, maybe I would bet on that happening.
Yeah.
People are going to travel from all over Europe and probably even some of them from the United States to go to Worlds next year. Like, it is that good. But that's next year. This year is all about Gannon. So he advances in the semis. All right. The other matchup is our 2 seed, Industry Slowdown, versus our 3 seed, Kristen, first to 1,000 rated. I'm going to throw it to Josh first.
I think Dan made the comment in the beginning in the first round. If Kristen had gotten to 1,000 rated the same year she hit a Grand Slam, we would have one of the most interesting bracket lineups of this versus Gannon. That just would have been crazy. But it was split. And I'm not sure where we're at in the mountain of Kristen's excellence in her career. I don't know if this represents a peak, if this represents, and maybe she may hold this level for a while, but I just don't know. And unfortunately, while this is history making, so is the industry slowdown. And it is defining so many of these topics could be folded underneath the shadow of the slowdown of the industry. And so I am going to give the break towards the industry slowdown, despite how impressive Kristen's 1,000 rating is.
I'm going to go to Dan because otherwise I'm going to decide it right away.
I'm going to do the same thing. So.
Doesn't that decide it anyway, Charlie?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
I think that I've already decided it, but maybe Dan was going to persuade me otherwise, but it seems not.
I wish I could, but no.
Can you tell us more about what you've seen, having been working in a disc golf shop for the last few years?
Yeah, this year in particular has really been felt. Just like significantly lesser day-to-day sales, fewer customers walking into the shop on your average day. It feels very much like, unless there's something brand new and really exciting, like people went crazy for Gyropalooza, which just came out yesterday. We had the brick and mortar exclusives, which people camped out for.
They straight up lined up before you're open.
So we only got half a dozen of them, but there were people who camped out starting at midnight. We open at 10 a.m.
MVP be crazy like that right now.
Spent all night in the parking lot in their car. Yeah. So they're very much like the diehards that are driving those kinds of sales, but it does feel very much like we're more reliant on those people than ever. And we're getting fewer people that are just walking in, being like, "Hey, I've heard about disc golf, playing it for the first time," or "It's time to get new discs for my bag." We love our regulars, and they're keeping it going for us right now. But just the kind of random passersby are not coming in the same volume that they had been.
What do you think disc golf needs to do to turn this around and get it going in the right direction again?
That's definitely a question above my pay grade. I feel like disc golf needs to do a better job of just getting more people playing consistently. I think I don't know if underserved is the right term here, but just large demographic swaths that are just not being, not feeling welcomed or not being, accessed in any way, really. And it just feels like those are big pockets of the population that if you get them out playing, I think that's a big thing. Like, fewer people are just playing disc golf right now than they had been, during the pandemic and shortly thereafter. So just finding out some way to get more people playing feels like the big one to me.
Well, I just think this is a bigger story. I feel like this story has been increasingly important over the last couple of months, that I'm like hearing more about it. And Kristen's 1,000 rating, like, definitely a storyline to remember in the future. And if this slowdown is merely a thinning out of the crowd from the COVID times, which is possibly the most likely outcome, then we will not be talking about this much in a few years. We'll just be like, oh yeah, COVID was crazy, and then there was a couple lean years, and then it was all good again. But as it stands right now, this feels like the most pressing thing happening in disc golf. So industry slowdown advances. We've got our number 1 and number 2 overall seeds in the final. It's Gannon's dominance versus the industry slowdown, and we'll go right back to Dan.
Oh man, this is so difficult. Again, like it was last round. I mean, this is very much the on-course versus off-course, right? And the optimist in me says Gannon is the story of the year. The pessimist in me says the industry slowdown is the story. So which side do I fall on this morning? That's the question. I think I am going to choose to be an optimist. I think we've both laid out the merits of both these stories. I think they are both very much ones to keep an eye on going forward. Maybe more so the industry slowdown is like a concern. You know what I mean? Something that people that are invested in the sport should have alarm bells going and trying to solve. But in terms of the sport's history, I'm going to choose to say that Gannon's historic season, massive proclamation that he is the new it, is the defining story of 2024.
Josh?
Last season, we had the 4 and the 7 seed make it to finals.
Crazy.
And it was crazy. And the things that felt like dominated the year weren't the things that we kind of took away as being the permanence of what was going to continue to define the sport. And I think we made the right call so last season, our 1 and 2 seeds was the transgender lawsuits here in the United States, and then the Gannon and Prodigy suits. So we had these kind of dueling lawsuits that really felt like they kind of weighed on the season. But all at the end, we prioritized the Simon and Kristen stories that I think still, and I think that was the right call. Those lawsuits, while still a part of our kind of collective memory, didn't permeate into this season the way that both Simon and Kristen did. And both are representative here in this bracket of both in MVP and Kristen's 1,000 rated. So I think we made the right call last season. But this season, it comes down to the 1 and the 2 seed, because I think if you keyword searched our podcast, if someone transcript every word that Charlie and I said this season, and then keyword searched anything related to the industry slowdown or to Gannon, these two would blow everything else out of the water by exponential proportions, because they really did define the on-course and off-course entirety of this season, and was something that was just a central feature. And so it really, I think these are the correct choices to be in the finals. I, like Dan, am going to choose to be an optimist this morning, though. And the other thing that I think is so significant here is that Gannon's dominance and Gannon Burr could hold not only the winning spot in our bracket for a decade or longer, but it could get the number 1 seed every single year for the next decade. That there is a world where that happens because of how amazing Gannon has been. And there's been some people who've emailed and said, well, yeah, but you said the same thing about Eagle once. We've never talked about any player the way that we talk about Gannon, and he is playing right now at a level that is unbelievable against talent between Anthony Barella and Isaac Robinson and Ricky Wysocki and Calvin Einberg, who are all in their own right phenomenal players, and he still manages to put together a season that he did. That's the reason why people are wondering if this season deserves to be considered the best season. I don't think it does, but it's the competition, the level of competition that Gannon is able to just conquer week after week, to the point that it felt like it was silly not to pick Gannon to win tournaments. That doesn't happen in MPO. It might not happen again in MPO, but if it does, it's going to be from this man here. Gannon gets the win this season. He is the storyline that defines 2024.
I completely agree. Look, I think at the end of the day, this is a sports podcast, and the sports storylines are usually going to be the things that tend to win out in my mind. And this is no exception. I think if we hadn't had a clear, a season like Gannon had, I think the industry story might have been number one overall. But it's going to have to lose here to Gannon because we are watching, we just watched the best season we've seen in at least 5 years. Yep. You could make a case for it being even better than that because of the level of competition and how high it is these days. The only thing he feels like he didn't do was win Worlds. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, like, how much more can you ask? Like, he was playing against people who were playing amazing. Remember, he almost ran down AB at Texas State's despite trailing by like 8 strokes going into the final round. Like, stuff like that. Like, it just feels like he can just decide, I'm going to birdie every hole the rest of the round. And then he just does. Like, the level of execution is crazy. And he's only getting better. That's what's wild. He's like adding shots to his game.
Yeah. Well, he's still so young.
And so young.
He's
right?
evolving.
Like, not even close to his athletic prime yet. I see people sometimes getting mad about like him being discussed as a possible future greatest of all time. Because, well, look, he could get hurt, right? Look what happened to Will Schustrick, right? He got hurt. He was so great, and then he got hurt. And yeah, he could get hurt. He could. But, like, do we have any reason to believe that he's going to be injury prone? I don't even feel like he's hardly missed a tournament for an injury. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he's 19, so he should be resilient. But I feel like he's smart. I feel like he's not throwing full power practice rounds all the time. He is going to the gym. He understands what it's going to take. And maybe nutritionally still has some work to do and, maybe less McDonald's or whatever. But like that's also like standard of that age. I just feel like this is going to be the thing I remember about 2024 more than anything else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there it is. Your number one story of the year, Gannon Buhr's dominant season, over $200,000 in earnings, and let's remember, he made a bag switch. And got better by a lot.
Yeah.
That's also crazy. Like, a lot of players cannot do that. It takes them months to get their bag into shape. Wild stuff. All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Upshot. Thank you so much for tuning in. Dan, thanks for being with us. We'll love to have you back for the Gaffs bracket.
Yeah, that would be great. I just was on an Ultiworld non-disc golf podcast with Charlie and told him, I need to get a third person on for the tiebreakers when they come up, with no intention of being myself, and he invited me on. So truly an honor. Always enjoy coming on with you guys. Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to coming on for the Gaffs.
All right. For Josh Mansfield and Dan Prentice, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on The Upshot.